Hello there, and welcome to the Rambling to Myself podcast. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we are in the music corner with the final video of my Weezer series. Before anything, I would like to thank everyone for tagging along on this journey. It's been stressful and fun to churn out these videos, but it has helped me to better understand and appreciate Weezer a lot more than I used to. If anything, this has consolidated my position as a lifetime Weezer fan, no matter how the Black Album may turn out. But judging by the content released so far, I am no short of hype for it. So thank you for the support because I only ever dreamt of getting single digit views on all my videos for the series. And now, moving on from the sappy stuff, for the video itself and from this point on, all tracks will be considered S rank unless stated otherwise. And to start us off, we have the Blue Album. My name is Jonas. Probably the most epic opener to be written about insurance frauds. My Name is Jonas is filled to the brim with impact from start to end, opening with this simple yet effective acoustic riff that constantly rings out in the thumping power chords that the album is known so well for. The contrast and explosion that comes in is just nothing short of sweet. The breakdown from the workers are going home section into this blasting riff that repeats to the very end makes for a very exciting opener as it just throws you straight into the no one else. I feel this is a song that many people can relate to in times where feelings of overprotection and simply wanting some level of control, no matter how absurd and impossible that would be, is. The way the intro fumbles into this song where it continues cascading with the author's idealistic views on a perfect girlfriend to the point of absurdity as the song continues on with the heavy guitars and the author sounds more and more desperate to completely take control over his SO's entire life is just very well done. Short and straight to the point, this song is just great. And then it just leads into the world has turned and left me here. The song starts where the author has basically been left as a result of his possessive and clingy nature from no one else. While the acoustic guitar tries to shine like the author's hopes, the song is constantly weighed down by this heavy and chugging track that perfectly encapsulates the themes revolving around being hopelessly stuck and saddened by the shitty situation you put yourself into. And now the author is left with nothing but the memories and what ifs he could have had if he wasn't such a creep. Buddy Holly. The entry point for most Weezer fans, this song is great, it's fantastic, and it's Buddy Holly. I initially didn't really enjoy the song as much as I do now, but it grew on me really quickly, with the lyrical themes of standing up for your girl despite of how much everyone is saying it's a bad idea, and the lightheartedness with the ooh-oohs and the way the choruses are handled with sillier lyrics. The song really does exemplify the repeating I don't care about that. And of course, the best part of this song is the rap section, where the guitars just go ballistic into a guitar solo that fades into itself, into one of the highest points of Weezer period. Undone, the sweater song. For more casual music listeners and non-fans of Weezer, this song may be a bit of an instant turn-off as comments of it's just spoken word or it sounds good if only there wasn't a talking isn't really enough to hold the song's interest. But in contrast to this, I think that it fulfills the whole point of the song, which is to show a scene of an author being bummed down and basically dead in social situations, to the point where he might as well not be there, as lying on the floor would achieve the same result of him stammering and dying from social anxiety. The song is a bunch of white noise and random conversation that doesn't make sense to events that the author may not even care about, and it just gets more and more chaotic as the author feels more and more uncomfortable with his social being. The eventual tumble as the song starts snowballing into the chaos that is the final chorus and the outro of instrumentals is very well done, with Rivers belting out his vocals to burn out into this explosion of music, with the acoustic guitar placed perfectly to showcase the increasing speed of the song into this very keyboard and guitar effect. The song is just a pleasure to sit through as it builds upon itself so well, weaving almost perfectly into the themes it's set to achieve. Surf Wax America. Moving from the slower sweater song, this song blasts straight back into the unforgiving rock heavy sound that Blue Album has established thus far. This song also adds a layer of dynamics, with the best part of the song coming when Match Up is singing with the atmosphere and Rivers is just casually floating about. Despite of how many snare and crash swells there are, it never gets too loud and it's just produced phenomenally. I feel it exists as a perfect bridge between Undone and Say It Ain't So, as a light-hearted hypothetical about going to work with a surfboard between two very heavy songs, both in sound and in themes. Say It Ain't So. Probably one of the best Weezer songs to be written. I think this song really shows the potential and skills that Rivers Cuomo has as a songwriter. Although it is a bit of a meme, the line "Wrestle with Jimmy" may be one of my favorite lines of the album, as it has so much depth to it, more than people really give it for. The instrumentation with the light jazzy chords with freely riffs thrown throughout simplistic drum beat to keep the song in place, and the popping bass line. The verses are pretty much perfect as it leads into this exploding heavy chorus with gnarly bends coming in later as the song gets heavier and heavier. Whilst the guitar solo is not as godly as Buddy Holly, it is still extremely good in its own right with the right and left usage of the stereo effects. The most important point to this song is also the lyrics, as they give a very clear insight into the background of Rivers, along with painting a very clear picture of how the trauma of alcoholism from those around him has affected him, to the point where he began being afraid and doubting that even his stepfather might leave him as a result of that. Although he has stated a single song may fail to represent every single layer to such a complex issue, I think it does a pretty excellent job. This song just hits hard both musically and lyrically, and is nothing short of perfection. A classic throughout and the entry point of most Weezer fans. This song is a must listen for anyone who's interested at getting into Weezer at all. In the Garage. The song does an excellent job of portraying the nerdiness we know and love Weezer for. I think the switch up from the cleaner crunch overdrive guitars to this more stripped down growling tone helps with the song, and unlike I'm Your Daddy or In the Mall, this is how you should actually emulate the sound of a more stripped down guitar tone. The usage of harmonicas and the fuzzy bass is beautiful and really well done, along with the touches of the ringing riffs in the background. Holiday. A direct contrast to the fleeting feeling of Island in the Sun, this song instead aims at a more straightforward, excited feeling focused on being free and charging headfirst into the new holiday season. Although I think this song is a bit shoved to the back and in comparison to the other material thus far, a little bit weaker, it still does a great job of being a fun and free song, and if anything, this track is a perfect send-off from the album into the finale and goodbye that is Only in Dreams. Only in Dreams. Holy fucking shit, Weezer. I adore this song so much, and it does an excellent job of wrapping up the whole album's sound and themes. I honestly think this is as perfect of a perfect closer Weezer could have done for the album, from the thumping bass lines leading into this typical Weezer chorus that we know and love so much. And along with the harmonics and swelling violin synths within the verses, the song just does such a great job of building up itself all the way to the end. Rivers straight up sucker punches the listener with its overbearing mixture of octaves and belting, as the song just gets louder and louder, with the guitars eventually taking over the spotlight left behind by Rivers as he steps away from the microphone, and everything follows suit into this slow instrumentation where the drums slowly move away. And as soon as you think the song is over, the guitars slowly fade and flutter in as the bass goes faster with the drums following in slowly. Everything just comes in so perfectly placed as the song explodes into a cacophony of solos and creates this just very beautiful soundscape with guitar pedals switching on left and right, taking control of the song rapidly while you're ascending into the heavens above, with the drum fills increasing in quantity, which leads into this stripped down acoustic guitar and bass to end the song and album with a single note of perfection. This track is not only a good song to listen to, but it just gives such an overwhelming emotional response that only Angel and the One has achieved thus far, that I can't really do any less than praise this song as well as I can. And now on to conclude things. On my first listen far way back when I first discovered and got into Weezer, I thought that the Blue album was far too crunchy and bassy, but I would have to say it grew really well onto me, and I really think that the sound of the guitars are perfect for the album. It really showcases Weezer at their best with these huge crunchy guitars and the most energy Rivers has to offer from front to back in his vocals, constantly channeling his inner rock star to give out the most deliveries and emotional screams throughout the album. The best thing about the album is how well it's aged, and in fact it sounds far too modern for the date it was released at. In fact, the album itself easily destroys the production on most of the other albums that come after it, and there's just this level of quality and consistency on Blue that can't be found on any other album on such a scale in Weezer's whole discography. A lot of these songs are also very unpolished, not in the sense of production and ideas, but in the sense that they have nothing to lose and are willing to do whatever they want. They feel like a perfect delivery of great ideas and executed to an almost scarily perfect level, with most tracks feeling like straight up super well made and polished garage demos. This adds truth to the atmosphere and themes of the album, from hopelessness to desperation to confusing time as awkward teenagers and nerds. Most of the tracks on the album are nothing really more than simple rock tracks, but done so differently that there's a real sense of uniqueness for every song on the album. And unlike the Green album, this album has ambition and heart, with there being such an absurd amount of variety present on the album that's actually quite insane to think that this was Weezer's debut album. Along with that ambition also comes with the risk-taking from Sweater's song, which may sound completely absurd on paper, because who would think having random conversations being the bulk of a rock song would be a good idea? Despite clocking it at a good 40 minutes, this album feels way shorter than it actually is, as you just enjoy yourself so much you forget to really watch the clock. This album knows not to overstay its welcome and ends in the best way possible with one of my all-time favorite Weezer closers. However, as much as I do enjoy the Blue Album, I do feel there's a lack of a certain sense of flow from front to back, with less of storytelling elements present on the album, as it focuses more on the individual quality of every single track, rather than the whole bigger picture. This is felt most in the tracks Surf Wax America, In the Garage and Holiday, as the album tend to take a sharp detour in terms of themes and sound. And whilst this is not an inherently bad thing at all, because like I said, there's no real bad tracks on the album, it's just that on my own personal preference of listening to an album front to back, it can get really easy to skip or come back to tracks individually, as the Blue Album presents itself as such, an extremely well-crafted collection of tracks that stand the test of time, creating the very foundation and expectation that still plagues Weezer to this very day. And judging solely on that fact that if I were to compare the album based on its songs, then the Blue Album wins by a very big long shot in comparison to my first and second picks. However, I much prefer some of the certain self-awareness, honesty, and storytelling aspects of my first two choices that are not as prevalent on the Blue Album. Now that Blue Album is over, we can now move on to the second place, which is Pinkerton. Now, before we go into my Pinkerton review, I want to first say that this review will be completely different from my usual style of reviewing albums. Instead of reviewing the album track by track, I will instead bring back my concept section from the Red Album to present my own write-up of my interpretation of Pinkerton's story track by track instead. I'll explain why I chose to do so in the full album review. Again, there may or may not be a concept at all similar to Red, and all of this is subject to how I see the story, so it could be completely different from other people's versions of it, or completely wrong from whatever official version there may be out there. Skip to the time on the screen if you just want to go to my final review similar to the Red Album. If you want to stick along, then here we go. The album starts off by introducing the author as a rock star who has sex with many girls to try to get a sense of his self-worth and to cope with his general feeling of loneliness. Despite of how he seemingly gets girls without thinking, all this is extremely superficial and nothing more than meaningless one-night stands. The author yearns for something more, which is an actual love not based on pure lust. In desperation, the author randomly chooses one of the girls he hooked up with to date seriously. But the only thing he really gains from this relationship is how worthless he feels since the girl isn't really serious at all, along with many regrets of the girls he's hurt along the way, as it begins to surface to his conscience. The relationship begins to fall deeper into shambles, as the author finds every line of reasoning as to why they shouldn't break up, no matter how absurd of a reach it is, because the author doesn't want to feel lonely anymore. The author thinks that this is how love is meant to be and takes the abuse until he just can't anymore and breaks out whilst giving up on the idea of love completely. This feeling of giving up and surrender is further exemplified in Why Bother, and in wake of the breakup, the author begins looking at other girls lustfully again, but decides not to act on his instincts and emotions as he's afraid of getting hurt or hurting any others. He's trapped in a loop of being sexually frustrated while trying to be more human himself, weighed down by his past as he's continually reminded daily by the sins that he had committed. But despite of how much he wants to not get into another relationship because of how badly the previous one ended, the author wonders if there's love beyond where he is. From the letters he received long ago to the many millions of anonymous faces when he was still actively touring as a rock star. He yearns for more than just being alone and grasps at impossible relationship ideals which just drive him crazy. The feeling of worthlessness returns as the author finds himself utterly alone. By now, it's been a good amount of time since he went around having sex everywhere and tired of sex. His feelings of not caring and apathy almost peaks as he gives up on trying to be a good person, as it really got him nowhere but to get cheated on by a girl he thought he could care deeply for. So he decides to return to when he was still having a good time, just being an uncaring fuckboy and a rock star. He no longer wants to be an old man with old values like being loyal and faithful. He just wants to have fun and justify his shittiness. However, in the midst of all his partying, the author finds a girl that reminds him of the girl he imagined back in Across the Sea. This idea of a crush and what he envisioned love could have been. He moves forward with his advances and they exchange numbers and get close enough to the point where the author is able to read her diary and stay at her house watching movies all the time. Over the course of this time, despite of how much fondness both of them have for each other, both parties never really directly express their feelings, as the author is just praying that she tell him that she fell for him too. Finally, the author works up the courage to confess to her. But this doesn't really end well because the author finds out that the girl he's been chasing all the time is actually homosexual. The author tries to make sense of all this madness and doesn't know what to do. He's sick and tired of all of this and begins packing up to get out of town. In fear of falling even deeper into despair like he did before, the author leaves. He looks back at all the fond memories they had one last time and doesn't really regret anything that they did together, but rather, he cherishes it as good memories. He lies to the girl that he will return one day, but secretly leaves on his journey to nowhere, knowing that he will never return to the town that he has lived in his whole life. The girl eventually finds out that the author isn't coming back as he sends her a song anonymously many years later. He apologizes in this song for any pain he may have caused her, but wants her to know that he cherishes the time they spent and hopes that he can forgive him for leaving her permanently and forsaking any reconciliation or friendship they could have had otherwise. To wrap this up, I chose to review the album this way because I feel as though there's not much to talk about musically, as the whole album's strength lies more on the creepy relatability and understanding of lyrical themes. If I did review track by track, I'd pretty much end up saying that all tracks are energetic and the music boiling down to mostly guitar, bass, drums with the occasional keyboard thrown into this very raw mix and having a very raw feeling to it, which wouldn't be very fun to sit through. The purpose of this segment was to highlight some of the storytelling aspects of the songs, and I obviously know that most of these songs have more personal connotations to River's personal life, and my response to this personal aspect to the lyrics is I think that they speak more for themselves, as they mainly comprise of literal meaning, along with there being not much of metaphors in the way of understanding these songs. I know it's probably more of a residual effect of them being more leftovers from songs from the black hole, but there's just enough present for me to be able to draw a cohesive line through the whole album from front to back. And that about does it for the concept from me. On to the final review. The album as a whole is fantastic and is a pure surge of unforgiving, hit-banging energy from overarching themes to musical simplicity. From the start with Tired of Sex to Why Bother, taking a slight breather at Across the Sea and building itself back through El Scorcho and exploding one last time in Falling For You. The minutes just zip by like nothing as the tracks blend seamlessly into one another. Instrumentation wise, whilst the album honestly doesn't have much going for it other than a very simple rock setup, I think the biggest strength to the album is how Weezer integrates this simple raw setup into a setting that truly immerses the listener into the world of Pinkerton, as no other sound within Weezer's catalogue could really accomplish what Rivers would be going for without sounding overproduced and cheap. The overarching theme of nerdy romance to the point of creepiness at times and brutally honest lyricism bring a sense of realism and depth that can't really be emulated with anything created less than personal in mind. It is truly impressive how well done the album is, despite its blatant simplicity, and therein lies its greatness. The simple power of relatability and honesty shining through a man just writing his heart out for the world to dissect. Pinkerton is unapologetic about the way it is. It doesn't care about what people think and sticks out like a sore thumb that got twisted the wrong way, but healed in a cool, weird way, and now people can't stop talking about it. In comparing to the Blue Album, whilst Blue Album has undoubtedly superior mixing and far stronger individual tracks that could trump any track on a versus basis, Pinkerton has a way of trapping its listeners with a sense of realism that just makes it so raw and unique, unlike anything I've heard before. Every song has a story to tell and a sense of flow from start to finish, as I always find it hard to leave in the middle of listening to Pinkerton to do anything else, as I'm just gripped by the sound and lyricism to want to listen to the album to the very end. Couple this with really catchy songs that are impossible not to sing along to. The only bad thing about this album is how short it is and how I wish there was more to it, though I do know that having any more would ruin the album, but that's beside the point. The point is, I really like this album and wouldn't mind having it run on repeat for the rest of my life because of not only how physically short it is, but how entertaining and relatable it is for me to run through front to back on a very constant basis. Now, for my number one Weezer album, the ultimate throwback album ever created, and the perfect send-off from classic rock Weezer to modern Weezer, Everything Will Be Alright in the End. Ain't Got Nobody. Perfect opener to this amazing album. This song is a slow grower as I initially thought that it wasn't that great of a track that doesn't really do much aside from having a great solo. As a first step into the album, the song starts off with an amazing build-up that kicks off into full throttle with the riffs. As with most of the guitar work on the album, the return of these huge chunky guitars from the Blue Album and Rivers' nerdy vocals is very much welcome, along with the generally great production. I absolutely love the glitchy solo in the song, and the slight tempo shift in the second last chorus is also very nice. The song is just a great guitar fest from start to end, although I will note that, as with most of the album, this album is best listened to on speakers as some of the mixing choices sound a little muddy on the headphones. Back to the Shack. An excellent follow-up to Ain't Got Nobody. This song slows down the tempo set into a very heavy song with an almost sluggish sounding chorus that's just very heavy and well made. The choice to allow instruments to come in and out throughout the verses is also an excellent choice to even further give the chorus its huge, grand, heavy sound. The lyrics have some significance and contextual importance to Weezer and the album in general, as it serves as an introduction to the scope that this album aims to cover, which is in regards to the works that the album has put out so far. This level of self-awareness is not really found anywhere, as the band takes a step away from their nerdy aesthetic to write songs about the hardships of being in a band and the romantic struggles faced in these times in a more adult light. Eulogy for a rock band. From the simple guitar riffs to the whirring tone, to the simplistic drum beat and astounding bass line, the song is nothing short of epic, with the pianos and grander scale of Red giving its final breath on this track. A very brooding and drudgy song. This song really does a great job of portraying the eulogy side of its title, almost like a send-off song for the sound of Weezer, as they never really come back to this full-on out-rock sound throughout a full album after this point, even in the White Album itself. In context of Back to the Shack, it really does paint a really sad image of Weezer as a band, as they've been making music for such a long time and it's come to a point where they're pretty much living in the shadow of the glory days of Blue and Pinkerton, with this song acting as a symbol of that trapped feeling of inadequacy in being forced to write rock songs that are dated in this era of music. Lonely Girl. This is straight up Blue Album material, with the simple moving crunchy guitar and straightforward drum beat, with the cherry on the cake being the god tier clean breakdown. Vocal work is phenomenal, with this level of grit in River's strained whispery vocals that hasn't been introduced before, painting a real sense of dread and wanting that has been missing for such a long time since Pinkerton. While some people, including my friends, have remarked that this may be a bit try-hard on River's part, I think that it works extremely well with the song and brings back this rock star vibe that I talk so much about in Blue Album. I've Had It Up to Here. Funky song with an overall very grand sound to it. From the experimentations of how far you can push rock music without adding pop synths to the general fresh take on Weezer, this is experimentation done right, albeit a bit safe and less adventurous than most adventures that Weezer has taken throughout their career. The return of the classic Blue to Pinkerton era keyboard toward the end is also very nice, along with the sparkles of the Red Album in the bridge. It's surprising to note that this song is only 3 minutes, as there's just so much material on it and the song is constantly changing up its sound throughout. That just feels like it's much longer than it has to be because of how much goodness it has. The British are coming. I like what the song is going for, but I feel as though the grand sound of this song needs to be pushed a bit further, as the sound of this track has been done far better in I've Had It Up to Here. A great song in its own right from start to finish, with a generous dash of guitar work. It's a great track that just feels weaker in comparison to the epic songs surrounding it. DaVinci. Holy shit, what a great song. To describe this song in a sentence, it's the greatest cheese that ever lived. It has the catchiness and charm of the Blue Album with a new facelift, with touches of pork and beans and the charm of Pinkerton. This song is just nothing short of fucking excellent. The mix is great, the production is great, the vocal delivery is perfect, the addition of this sweet piano bit is great, the outro with the arpeggios is great, and just in general the song is great, and it's one of my favorites of Weezer's whole discography. And like the way the song ends, yes, it was amazing. Go Away. One of the weaker tracks on the album, it feels especially weak coming after DaVinci. As with most songs and cases of this album, all the tracks are amazing. It's just that there's just so many good songs, and as a result, other good songs sound less impressive, if that makes any sense. These bending out of control guitars before the last chorus are also nice, and I think that it would have been nice if they just decided to re-record I Just Threw Out the Love of My Dreams instead, but oh well. Cleopatra. Whilst there are elements I enjoy in this song, I think overall the song is pretty standard in comparison. The breakdown and Egyptian riff is fucking epic though, with the 5, 10, 15, 20 blah blah blah. It's like I said earlier in Love Is The Answer. This is the right way to experiment other formats of music. Try to implement the sound and feel of other aspects and cultures into a rock format where Weezer knows what they're actually doing instead of ripping off something simply because it sounds alright. As well as not only helping the flow of the album by not completely going left field and derailing any good judgment I may have, it just makes more sense in overall to go about it this way instead of in Love Is The Answer. Although I admit it's not the biggest piece of experimentation or revolutionary thing Weezer has ever done, it is a good taste of what I was trying to explain and what Weezer could have done if they wanted to go straight up and make a weird track or something out of their comfort zone. I do wish that Weezer would go a bit further into experimentation and trying out new things, as there are certain elements like the bagpipes and Egyptian riff, because the song does get pretty basic at times. But it seems as though Rivers is pretty comfortable with experimenting with just pop elements, so I digress. foolish father. I find the lyrical themes of this, in contrast to Say It Ain't So, to be very touching, as it not only gives a sense of development but understanding to the situations that some people are put into, like resorting to alcoholism and decisions made as a result being dumb teenagers or the simple stress of adult life. To know that people are willing to change and are not always the same person who once made those same mistakes, the sentiments of the song are very sweet and well written in my opinion. And the image of a parent walking up to their grave plot knowing their children despises them is just a very heart-wrenching image, as Rivers placed himself in the shoe of his troubled father that he once had to endure. The build-up with the left-right single note guitars is also very well done to build up to the final part, but I think the weakest part of the song is its production choices, especially during the build up to the end, and the guitars being a bit too empowering in verses at certain times. But in all, I think the quintessential point about the song is the message it's trying to portray. Although the song may be somewhat weaker sounding in comparison to the rest of the amazing album, the strong message amplifies it to such an extent that I think the track is just really strong as a result of the emotional gut punch it brings, as well as giving a full circle feeling to Weezer's legacy. I don't think there's any other emotional tracks like these in Weezer's discography that actually made me feel something, and as such, this song is really something really special in their discography. The Future Scope Trilogy. Before anything, I would like to pull up this comment on the album from Genius that perfectly describes how I feel about not just this track, but the album as a whole. The reason I'm choosing to bring this up now is because there's a point I would like to make about the song later. I'll be talking about all three sections of the one song, as it'll just end up being comments on the guitar more than the themes and direction of the whole trilogy if I were to talk about the parts individually. I suppose the main thing to take away from this is how it's meant to be listened to, and that is to give a focus more on the instrumentation, hence the lack of much singing and lyricisms even in the second part, which is pretty much a repetition of phrases as stated by Rivers. It works as a perfect closer and ties up the sound of the album instead of just relying on the usual and on a very good track. And in relating to the quote I brought up earlier, envisioning this song as Weezer playing their final concert and just jamming to their heart's content just gives this song a sense of sentiment as a perfect send-off. It's a nice little instrumentation to help people wind down from the grand sounds of the album, almost like a second encore at their final live concert to help people know that that was a great concert. It's interesting to take into account that this album came after the production and mixing disasters that are Hurley and Raditude, and to some extent even the albums that come to follow this album. It's like the guitars teleported back in time to the Blue era and learned how to mix themselves again, or maybe it's because of the return of Rick Ocasek, but I guess we'll never know, huh? Rivers' vocal delivery on the tracks are phenomenal as it has so much emotion than just singing songs for the sake of singing along, with this album having some of the most phenomenal guitar work to be presented to date to go along with that. This album has everything and so much more, as it feels like everything has a purpose in being in the album. And like the word I chose to describe the album, this album is nothing short of focused to the core. Even in reading up the conceptualization of the album, it was stated to be divided into three big categories according to Rivers, which are the Belladonna, which are classic girl songs, the Panopticon artists, songs about people judging the band, and father figures. And this is nothing short of impressive, as it shows a real sense of musicianship and direction, with Rivers knowing what to do from the album from start to end. It shows a level of not only great songwriting, but a level of forethought and maturity unlike most of Weezer's discography. Most people would say that Maladroit is a grower, but I think that Everything Will Be Alright in the End is the best grower of all the albums in the discography. Whilst I initially didn't like how the album started off a little weak, that was because I failed to realize that it was more of the fact that the opener serves as more of a slow riser than most of Weezer's more explosive openers, such as American Gigolo, My Name is Jonas, California Girls, If You're Wondering, and Memories. In knowing that, I find myself enjoying the whole stretch from start to finish, although there are minor duds here and there like Go Away and some segments in Cleopatra that I mentioned earlier that just aren't as prevalent on my second and third choices of Blue and Pinkerton. But I think I can look past that, as there's just so much enjoyment and enjoyable content that even the weaker tracks are great in their own right, with no real glaring issues aside from slightly boring presentations. From start to finish, the album is just so consistently good that I find it hard not to want to sit through the whole album on a very regular basis. And in fact, this is my go-to album for Weezer, and the album I listen to the most from Weezer on a regular basis. Everything Will Be Alright in the End is essentially the ultimate throwback album, with everything I loved about Blue and Pinkerton combined with the epic scale that Red tried to achieve. It has great songs that stand on their own, it has a great album flow with an overarching idea, and very clear plans on what each track represents in itself and in context of the album. It has emotional gut punches that come in and out that renders you feeling so vulnerable and empathetic to the issues on the album. It has self-awareness and honestly doesn't feel forced, as it comments on the trials and tribulations the band is going through instead of singing about girls and issues from a vague perspective. perspective, and above all, it has focus unlike any other album that has been released by Weezer to date. As much as I would love to have an album that tops Everything Will Be Alright in the end, I find that Weezer is a bit too inconsistent these days to really achieve their soaring heights again. And speaking solely on the top 3 and not just my favorite pick, there's just a perfect balance of self-awareness and a level of production that hasn't really been achieved even until today. And I find myself puzzled as to why so many weird choices have been made even in the material released thus far from the Black Album. And with that, I can say with much confidence that Everything Will Be Alright in the end is my favorite Weezer album and will probably stay that way for a long time as it stands the test of time and is a really beautiful goodbye to the old Weezer sound we've come to love so much. And that is about all there is from me for now. Thanks for tagging along on this journey and I hope you enjoyed the series. I'll try my best to get the Black Album review up as soon as the album hits. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Stay Weezy.